Hello again, Jeff Scott. As always, I've fallen behind for the 152, 153 iOS swing class for spring 2014. I'm in the middle of the program for Chapter 8. The last program, I'm on page 285 in the book. It says, one problem with our current table is the sheer number of rows. There are 2,000 names in the list. One solution to this problem is to add an index down the right side. Now that we've set our table view back to plain, that's relatively easy to do. Add the following method to the bottom of viewcontroller.swift, which is where I am right now. So I'm going to make my way down to the bottom. I'm finishing this lecture today, as the saying goes, ideally come hell or high water. So let me hit enter a few times, give myself some room. Says that's it. In this method, the table is asking for an array of the values to display in the index. You must have more than one section in your table to use the index, and the entries in the array must correspond to the sections. Ideally, when we get done now, we're going to have our little index at the side. Still having problems getting this to run, but I'm going to try to fix it before I stick it out there on the system. Alright, the index is helpful, but even so, we have a lot of names here. If we want to see whether or not the name Arabella is in the list, we have to scroll for a while, even using the index. It would be nice to let the user pare down the list by specifying a search term. It's a little bit extra work, but it's not too bad. We're going to implement a standard iOS search bar using a search controller like the one shown in figure 827 on page 287. As the user types into the search bar, the list of names reduces to only those that contain the entered text as a substring. As a bonus, the search bar also allows you to define scope buttons that you can use to qualify the search in some way. We'll add 3 scope buttons to our search bar. The short button, which will limit the search to the names that are less than 6 characters long, the long button, which will consider only those names with at least 6 characters, and an all button, which has all names in the search. The scope buttons only appear when the user is typing into the search bar, and that's shown on the right-hand side of figure 827 on page 287. So, in iOS 8, adding search functionality is quite easy. You need 3 things. Some data to be searched, in our case that's the list of names, a view controller to display the search results, the view controller temporarily replaces the one that's providing the data, and a UI search controller that provides the search bar and manages the display of the search results in the view controller. So it says, let's start by creating the skeleton of the results view controller. We're going to display our search results in a table, so our results view controller needs to contain a table. We could drag a view controller onto the storyboard and add a table view as we've done in the past, but let's do something different this time. We're going to use a UI table view controller, which is a view controller with an embedded UI table view that is pre-configured as both the search, the data source, and the delegate for its table view. In the Project Navigator, right-click in the Sections group and select New File. We've done this before. In the template chooser, choose Cocoa Touch. And press Next. For our name, we want to say Search Results Controller. and make it a subclass of UI TableView Controller. Press Next. Choose the location for the file and let Xcode create it. Well, usually it creates it, but it puts it down here, which it did there. That's fine. So I'm going to move it up there. There we go. All right. We're going to implement the search logic in this view controller, so we conformed it to the UI. Oh, I'm sorry. We're supposed to first select it and make one change. So, as we oftentimes do, I'm going to add here UI search results updating. And the author mentions here, we're going to implement the search logic in this view controller, so we conformed it to the UI search results updating protocol. This allows us to assign it as a delegate in the UI search controller class. We will see later that the single method defined by this protocol will be called to update the search result as the user types into the search bar. Since it's going to implement the search operation for us, search results controller needs access to the list of names that the main view controller is displaying. So we'll need to give it properties that we can use to pass it to the names directory and the list of the keys that we're using to display in the main view controller. It says add the following code to the top of the file, which is where I am up here. All right, so we added the sections table identifier to hold the identifier for the table cells in the view controller. We're using the same identifier as we did in the main view controller, although we could have used any name we wanted. We also added two properties that will hold the names dictionary and the list of keys that we'll use when searching, and another one that will keep reference to the array that will hold the results. Next, we want to add a line to our view did load. Alright, it says that's all we need to do in the results view controller right now, so let's switch back to our main view controller and add a search bar to it. So let's make sure I don't have any errors on here. I've got that because I haven't added the stuff from my UI search results updating yet. We'll do that later. So we want to select viewcontroller.swift in the project navigator, and we want to add a property to hold a reference to the UI search controller instance. So with the stuff that we had up here, still have a bunch of blank lines in it, and I'll try to remember to get rid of those before I finish up. Alright, so after that outlet, Again, we're adding, that's a property that will hold a reference to the UI Search Controller instance that will do most of the work for us. Next, add the code that creates the search controller in the viewDidLoad method. This up a bit. Okay. And if you're following along, I'm on page 289 in the book. What doesn't it like here? Let results controller equals search results controller. Probably we haven't written this yet, but I'm not sure if that's what the problem is. Use of unresolved identifier search results controller. So let's hold off on that one. Break this up a little bit. Alright, we start by creating the results controller and set its names and keys. Then we create the UI search controller and pass it a reference to our results controller. This is the view controller that the UI search controller presents when it has results to display. Then we configure the search bar, which is created using or created by the UI search controller, and we set up its properties. The search bar's button titles property will contain the names to be assigned to the scope buttons. By default, there aren't any, but here we install the names of the 3 buttons we talked about earlier. All short for names that are 6 characters or less, and long that are for longer names than that. So far, we have created the search view controller, but we haven't connected it to our user interface. To do that, we get the search bar and install it as the header view in our main TableView controller. And that's the search bar.size to fit and TableView.table header view equals search bar. The table's header view is managed automatically by the table view. It always appears before the first row in the table selection. The size to fit method is used to give the search bar its appropriate size for its content. The final change that we made in there assigns, so that last line that's in there assigns a value of the UI search controller's search results updater property, which is of type UI results string. All right, turning up to 291. Again, each time the user types something into the search bar, UI Search Controller uses the object stored in its search results updater property to update the search results. We mentioned before we're going to handle the search in the search results controller class, which is why we needed to make it conform to the UI search results updating protocol. That's just about all we need to do in the main controller to add the search bar. Next, we need to return to our search results controller where we have two tasks to complete. Add the code that implements the search and the UI table data source methods for the embedded table view. All right, so as it says, let's go back to our search results controller.swift. All right, so it says add the following constant definitions at the very top, so we'll do that first. Then we're supposed to have the following code as shown on the bottom of page 291 and the top of page 292 to the end of the file. I was hoping I'd get done with this today, but as I can tell, I'm not. I'd like to at least get up to page 296 here, and then I could maybe do the rest of it at home this afternoon. So, go down to the bottom of the file. In fact, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go up to the top here. There's a lot of stuff that's commented out, so I'm going to put it right down here. So we're going to add quite a bit of code here, and then we're going to walk through it, and then add a little bit more code. Like I said, if I can get up to around page 296, I only have 3 or 4 pages left in the chapter to finish up. So. Alright, the author says then on 292, let's walk through the code to see what is happening here. First, we get a search string from the search bar in the index of the scope button that's selected. Then we clear the filtered names. Next, we check that the search string is not empty. We don't want to display any matching results for an empty search string. Then we define a closure for matching names against the search string. The closure is called for each name in the names directory and will be given a name as a string and return true if it matches and false if it does not. If the name matches or passes the test, we look at the for the search string as a substring of the name. If we find it, we have a match. Alright. Next, we iterate over all of the keys in the names dictionary, each of which corresponds to an array of names. Alright, finally on the bottom of page 293, the author says we need the table view to display one name from the filtered names array for each row. To do that, we implement the methods of the UI TableView data source protocol in our search results class. So we're supposed to add the following code down near the bottom. So right under what I've just added, I'm going to add a little bit more here. Alright, I'm just going to stop it right here and I'm going to continue to add code, but I'm going to stop taping and I'll pick it up next time. So I'm on page 294, so I've got about 5 pages left in the chapter.